First item on the agenda is seating of the alternates. We have no need to seat alternates tonight. Next thing is adopting or changing the agenda. Any suggested changes to the agenda as presented? Hearing none, we'll move on with the agenda. The first thing on the agenda is the 2010 Historic 11 Town Audit Report. And Chris King is here to walk us through it.
For anybody that doesn't have one, in the box over here, and there's one of these, and one of those. And one of those.
We only got part one. There you go.
That's why it seemed light.
This and something?
Yeah, it's two different sizes.
Yep.
Do you have an extra one, or is this the
You
one?
need the, I think you need the big one.
I need to give both of them?
Anybody else need?
Thank you. All right.
They're free.
Well,
No, not really. Don't pay that bill.
Should I sit at this end?
Sure.
Yeah, come on.
Thanks for coming. Okay, well, thanks for having me, and thanks for having us as your auditor. Two reports. One is the financial and statistical data, the one with the town seal on it, and the smaller one is basically compliance reports that are required of all your grant audits, or your grants require the audits. So you really have three audits here: a financial statement audit in the big binder, then you have a federal and a state single audit or grant audits in the smaller package. We'll start with the big one. This is even bigger than a standard financial audit, because you have, if we go to page, I think it's page three, we prepare this package with some extra schedules, and then we submit it to the National Government Finance Officers Association, which is the association for finance professionals and municipal accounting. And they have a set of criteria that's above and beyond the normal financial statement audit. And if you meet their additional criteria, they pass you and they award the town a certificate. You've been getting this for a few years. We offered it to the town basically as for us, it's marketing, say that we do one. And at the time, I think I pointed out, Canton has it, Farmington, Avon, everybody kind of going east of here has it. Not many, well, Winston does have it, but beyond that, not many people have it going west of here. So everybody bigger than you, I would say, has it. Everybody smaller than you doesn't. You were kind of on the line, but now you have it. Starting on page 4 is a letter. It's called a transmittal letter. Basically, it comes from the selectman's office, and so first selectman goes through this and writes a lot of this. It's more narrative explanation of what's happening, and not so much of the numbers, although it discusses various transactions that go on throughout the year. After that, on page, let's go to page 10. This is also from management's point of view, but is intended to be a narrative discussion of the financial results of the past year. And there are a number of bullet points on page 14. And I guess you could think of it, if you were trying to read the financial statements without understanding the numbers, I guess the theory is that someone could go through this section and get an idea of what happened. On page 14, you can see there are major revenue factors listed, major expense factors. So those are the things that normally change from year to year, and so those are pointed out for the average citizen who might pick up your audit report, if there is such a thing. Page 15, there are some bulleted items on highlights of debt and capital project activity, and those typically change from year to year. At the bottom half of the page, you can see the roof replacement projects, sewer, and the salt shed. Then after that, we get into the financial statements, and after trying to convince people that the full accrual version is useful, I think I agree with them that it's not. So we'll skip to page 19. Nobody can understand those first few pages, and everybody seems to say, what are the pages we care about? There's only about 3 or 4 pages. So,
Hey, Chris, on the audit, on page 13,
yeah.
governmental activities,
Mhm.
it's probably just a little bit of an error, but it says written out 76%, but in parentheses it's 72%. And beneath it, it says 21%, and in parentheses 25%.
Okay. That got through.
Okay.
So, page 19, this is the balance sheet. And what I want to point out here is, on the bottom half of the page, the fund balance section, there used to be the categories unreserved, reserved, and undesignated or designated. They simplified it into 5 categories now. And there is a description of what they all mean. But to try to summarize, going from the top to the bottom, the top being non-spendable, the bottom being unassigned, there are various levels of restrictions. Non-spendable means you can never turn those assets, which in this case is school cafeteria inventory, into cash. The restricted category means that those funds can only be used for the purposes listed, and those restrictions are placed by an external source, so you cannot change them internally. They're generally grants, but you can see historical documents. Town clerk collects historical document fees. It must be used for historical document preservation. You cannot internally redesignate that money. The next section is committed, which is an internal restriction, which is often by an ordinance or a budget motion, but you could go back to town meeting, a referendum, and redirect that money. Assigned is generally an intent, but is not formally restricted. The assigned in the general fund column, now it says see note 8 because there wasn't enough room to list them all here, is for, well, I'll turn to page 8 because I think there's multiple categories. That's note 8. Page 47. The general fund has 3 purposes that it's assigned. About 145,000 of it was for the budget you're in now. 148,000 was CRRA money, and the 171 was a motion made by the board setting aside some fund balance for capital improvement a number of years ago. So those, other than the subsequent year budget, they're not as restrictive as a town meeting or an outside grantor. And then the rest of the funds, any money in any fund other than the general fund is by default assigned, otherwise it would be in the general fund. So the only fund balance that's unassigned is whatever's left over in the general fund. That's the simplified explanation. But they're kind of descending categories of restrictions. The notes do mention that. I'll go through them on page 33. Going from page 33 to 34. The bottom half of the page, it discusses non-spendable, restricted, committed, and goes on to the following page. So that would be where you go if you can never remember what the 5 categories of fund balance now are. And that was brand new for this year. It's GASB Statement 54. Some of you may remember when we had to revamp all the financial statements, that was GASB 34, so we're already 20 statements beyond that. Actually, they're up to 62, but they're not all effective.
The unassigned fund balance, that is basically the surplus as of June 30th.
Right.
We asked Chris when he was preparing these to put in some extra narrative, like on page 15, to describe the differences from last year to this year so that the reader would understand the changes in funding. Right?
Yeah, it made it kind of hard to compare apples to apples, because last year we had undesignated, or unreserved and reserved, and now we have 5 categories, so it was hard to say, you know, X percent last year, X percent this year. So, basically, unassigned is whatever's left over in the fund balance. Assigned, you could potentially get at. So, like the SERA money, the settlement money, you could reverse that and kind of release that. So that's how it works. Beyond that, the committed, the restricted, the non-spendable, pretty much it's going to be tougher to get at. Page 23 is your income statement in a familiar format, the budget versus actual. This is the kind of format that you deal with, that you develop, and you're looking to get reports back on that format. There is a slightly different one on page 21, but that incorporates things that are not budgeted, like the wastewater treatment plant activity. There was financing going in and out, so one year might be higher than your budget results, another year might be lower. But this is your budget statement, and so you had initially planned to use $355,000 of surplus. You did not need it, and you still returned a surplus of the year of $138,647. The next few pages are the WPCA. It's called the proprietary fund, and the subcategory of that is the enterprise fund, because it's run like a business. It's supposed to support itself on fees for services.
What did you just say, Bob?
I said it's supposed to support itself on
That's what I
fees
thought.
for services. Now, this year, I kind of have muted praise, maybe, you know, the last 2 years they've been running good deficits, but this year on page 25, there's operating revenues, operating expenses. They have an operating loss of $219,000, $220,000, but $260,000 of it is depreciation. Now that they've got the new plant online, the depreciation charges are going to be significant for a number of years. And that was, you know, primarily funded with grants and then borrowing. So I think a better indicator of where it is on page 26, which is the cash flow statement. It's going to kind of back out some of these accrual adjustments that happen. And because of some good collections, the cash flows from operating was $116,000. They actually drew down the amount of outstanding receivables from good collection rates. So operations produced $116,000 of cash, with which you then go to the next section and you start to pay down your debt. So the debt load was 79,000, leaving about 38,000.
So where does the loan that the town gave them factor into this? I think where is that? That's about 130 some odd thousand, right? So,
Yeah, the 100, it's over on the page 24, it's in their debt, it's in the balance sheet, it's gonna be carried in the balance sheet until it is repaid.
but where, I mean, what line, are you talking about, long-term notes payable or something?
Well, it's in the interfund advances. That is made up of, is it 110 plus 30,000, are those the numbers?
The interfund advance, the 2.2 million?
Right, there's three things in there now. The big one is the, I'm not gonna get all the percentages right, but the 39% of the loan.
61.
61% that the WPCA owes to the general fund. So it's 61% of the wastewater treatment plant loan. Plus, there's two kind of cash flow loans. And are
For
they,
water.
you know, is it 110 and 30 or 80 and 30 for total 110? Do you remember off the top of your head?
I don't.
Well, I think we give them a lump sum at a town meeting of about 130 or 135,000, if I remember.
Yeah, that sounds like a familiar number.
That number is still in interfund advances.
I think the thing that stands out to me is, first of all, their revenue was up significantly over the last 3 or 4 years, where they were operating in the $500,000 to $550,000 range. They're now in excess of 615. And this would be probably the first year in 5 or 6 years that their revenues less their debt service actually showed a positive.
Right, and that's rate increases have kicked in. Now,
So they've turned a bit of a corner there.
Yeah, but from a cash basis, I mean, if I'm not mistaken, I thought that this was the year or next year the loan is due back to the town, correct? Next year, 2013? Calendar year or in the budget year?
yeah, I'm not sure if you did on that. But the other thing that'll kick in is the principal repayment on the new loan, because this year was an interest-only.
Second year of a deferral.
Yeah. So you do have some more debt service is gonna be ramping up for them as well. That's why I said it's kind of muted praise. It's in the positive mood, or positive move, but there is some more debt service coming into play here. And as you mentioned, they still have the kind of working capital loan that the general fund made a few years ago. So I think that cash flow is probably gonna be more important to focus on than the income statement, because that depreciation, I don't like to discount depreciation, but when you put online a huge investment like that, depreciation is gonna be significant for a number of years.
How many years can you depreciate that down?
That's, I think it might be 40 years.
Is pretty good.
Yeah, we don't have to follow the tax rules, so we generally go with rounded like 30 or 40 years. I think these are 40. Page 41. Gives some detail on the outstanding debt issues of the town, and it's broken out mostly. There's governmental activities and business type activities. Again, that's a technical accounting term. Business type activities is the debt that's carried in the WPCA. Now, the governmental activities has the USDA note, but that's because that's actually a general fund note that's being partially financed by WPCA. And so this gives details of all the outstanding issues. page, I'm gonna jump ahead to page 45. Page 44 and 45 get into your pension plan. And you've been funding at just over 100% of what the actuaries are recommending that you fund, which is really the best that you can do, all that you can do. And of course, every time they do an evaluation, the numbers, the assumptions change a little bit, such as investment returns, which have been lower than anticipated over the past few years. But it seems that you are holding steady on that. And page 44, are there any actuaries at the table? Alright. Page 44, they come up with what the contribution would be and then make adjustments. Because it's supposed to, if you fund 100% of what they tell you to fund, you will eventually be fully funded in 30 years. So they kind of have you catch up slowly. So, but in 30 years the assumptions will be all different and you'll still be underfunded, but but anyway, the assumption is that if you pay their recommended amount, you will be fully funded in 30 years. And that's common. Sometimes it's 10 or 20 years. They have different assumptions that they use. They do use a rate of return of investments of 8%, which is on the high side. But on the other hand, you use Hooker and Holcomb, which are very good actuaries in our experience. There are a lot of lousy ones, but Hooker and Holcomb is not a lousy one. So we do give that some weight.
Didn't we end the format a couple of years ago based on that same percentage problem?
We have what?
Didn't we have a problem with that a few years back? When we were short funding that, and we had to end up paying it back, increasing the
We
amount.
short funded it for a while, we had school paying different amount than the town for a while, but I don't think we were really that too far off the track for the last
The,
10 years anyway.
I think the valuation would show that while you're funding at 102%, the actual valuation would show that you only have 59 or 60% of what you actually need to pay the people that are on the existing payrolls now. That's probably what Chris is saying, is that sooner or later you'll get there. Never seems to happen. When I came into office, I think the pension fund balance was about $1.8 million and nosedived to $1.6 million. And now, over the last year, has rebounded to $1.9 million. So it is just a roller coaster, but one thing is certain, it doesn't seem to be going into the $2 million range, and everybody wants to get paid every month, and we keep paying the same amount, and the market is as unpredictable as ever. And
Page 48 and 49 have a trend. You have major valuations on every other year, so this actually covers 8 years. Page 48, column 3, your funded ratio. So you've been paying 100% for the past few years, and you're at 59%, whereas 8 years ago you're at 70%. So, so again, I mean, what else are you going to do except do what the actuaries tell you? If you thought, you could say that, gee, maybe you should address your investment return. 8% seems a little aggressive. You could have them adjust it down. Their required contribution will go up, and then your funding ratio might go up faster. Page 49 is a longer table of contributions. I think 2006 was low, and maybe that was a year where there was some underfunding. Seems like there was a confusion in one year, and maybe that was in 2006. But other than that, you've been funding 100% or greater. The next 20 pages or so are detail. These are the columns that roll up into the front sections that we were looking at. not gonna go through all those, but if you wanted to look at the dog fund activity or, the, small cities rehabilitation loan program that gives out, loans to people for rehab on the house, that fund is in here. I'll jump to page 67, where the print gets smaller. And this is a lot of statistical data, but it does show trends. So you can look at these and see trends in revenues and expenses. Page 70 has a trend on fund balances. So it just kind of gives you a nice overview. There's a lot of data in these. There's a lot of tax grand list history. Again, this is actually the optional part that you have to have in order to get the certificate. That was on page 3 for excellence in reporting. And there's just table after table. They're all required for what this is called a comprehensive annual financial report. Every single one of these has to be in there. If you don't have it in there, you'll fail and not get the certificate. So we have to get a lot of cooperation from the town departments. We get information from the assessors and the town clerks and highway and fire department and all over the place. The smaller package is, as I mentioned before, the grant audits. There's a federal section and a state section.
Before we leave this larger audit, in terms of how we did for the year relative to budget, what we thought we would spend versus what we spent, or put this way, in terms of where we thought the fund balance would end up versus where it did end up. If I look at page 23, if I'm understanding this right, on the revenue side, we picked up an extra, let's call it $140,000 revenue, but we didn't pull in $355,000 worth of surplus, right?
Right.
So, would it be safe to say from where we planned on being, or where we planned the fund balance to be, aren't we $355,000 plus the $138,000 on the spending side? Is that $138 on the spending?
Well, 138 overall.
That's overall. Aren't we the 355 plus the 138? Does that represent the change in our fund balance?
Yes, you're
So 500,000 roughly.
right. You're assuming a deficit of 355. The actual resulted in 138, so you're 500 and something. About 500 to the positive of what you expected.
Okay.
Was that your only question?
No, that's what I wanted to get clear on.
So the federal and state audits, there are a lot of reports giving our opinions that there's not significant non-compliance with the grants. In other words, you're complying with the terms of the grants. There's a schedule of federal grants expended on page 5. With the ARA stimulus funds, it's a short-term thing. Last couple of years, it's going to go away. And basically, anything that's ARA money has got to be identified. So, in the Department of Education, there's 2 that they have. Basically, the state fiscal stabilization fund, that was in lieu of ECS payments. When they cut ECS, they replaced it with these federal funds. There's a state schedule on page 12. A lot of the grants are recurring. Your Town Aid Road grant comes every year, and your manufacturing equipment grants where the state pays you for your loss and tax revenue. But then there's also grants that come and go under DECD, Economic and Community Development. You have the STEEP grant for $246,000. I think that one was the salt shed. I got that right. And then there's also a steep grant under DEP. Those are usually open space acquisition. I don't remember what yours was for.
Wastewater treatment.
Wastewater.
Always, okay.
Sewer line.
And then our findings are on page 15. We have two. The first one has to do with bank accounts, and it's somewhat of a repeat of the prior year, but not exactly, because it has been partially taken care of during the year that we audited. Basically, the main accounts, we were suggesting an independent review of bank accounts. That we had a number of bank accounts where only one person would really ever see the statements and handle all the transactions. We suggested that someone else be reviewing these, and so the main accounts, the big accounts, such as the general fund, that was taken care of, but not all accounts. And actually, there's probably more of a concern over the auxiliary accounts, the ones that you don't see very often. Those are the ones that when you're reading the newspaper that someone has taken the money, they take it from those because no one's ever looking at them. So basically that's what we came up with. We saw that the main accounts are being looked at now. We just recommended to complete the process and that all the accounts be looked at. The second one, and it's our understanding that's gonna be taken care of.
I believe we actually have the system in place now where we've created the inboxes and the outboxes, so all the bank accounts are reviewed monthly, and
Alright.
I'll show it to you before you leave.
The second
Yeah,
one,
but that's a process, I guess my question, because this was something that came up previously. What's the division? I wanna make sure that there's a division and there's accountability on both sides, pluses and minuses, so, you know, you've got plenty of people, so what is the procedure you're putting in place to make sure it's taken care of so we don't have this finding next year? So the person that's receiving it is not also spending it, or banking it and also writing checks at the same time.
yeah, in this town, I don't think you can get away from that. I think you're gonna have the same person.
Then what do we do? What's the suggestion?
The independent review, which basically is the treasurer going through the statements, looking for any anomalies.
And who's checking this treasurer?
Well, what we always say is the only way we know it's been done when we come in is that there's an initial on the statement.
So you have somebody that's checking, I'm not saying, because things are happening, all over the world obviously, but, you know, we got millions of dollars sitting in the bank. There's one person that has access to the accounts, and that's the treasurer in terms of whatever happens with the transactions, but who's,
More than one person has that.
well, no, I understand it, but who's validating it and signing off on it, and we should make sure that we have that same process with the other accounts as well.
Well, most of the accounts, Annie is primarily responsible for all the transactions, cutting the checks, and the treasurer is the offset on this one, because the treasurer is not so much cutting checks.
Okay.
So if the treasurer is making wires out of the accounts, Annie's gonna pick up on it when she does her bank reconciliation. If Annie is cutting checks that don't make
Right.
sense, or balances are not as they are reported, the hope is that the treasurer will pick up on that.
Okay, but we have, we have more than just one person authorized to do a wire, right? We have to have other people.
Andy does it.
Gordon and Dan.
Only Gordon and I have authority to do wires now, that's one of the procedures that we've changed.
It's not just one person, two people have to approve it, right? At the minimum.
Three people have to
Three?
approve any transaction, two of the
Okay.
selectmen and the treasurer, and all the warrants of the town are approved by week.
Okay.
That's another overlay, as you see, is that at this point in time, if you wanna create the duplication that would really happen, you hire another full-time person, you know, for $50,000 in benefits. That doesn't happen, so in the status quo, at this point in time of our history, where we have one person and enough workload for one person to do it, we maintain the oversight of the selectmen coming in the office every 2 weeks reviewing. and that's not necessarily every 2 weeks, the selectmen could come in at any time and review purchase orders, you know, that are on, target to be paid every 2 weeks.
I guess if you guys, I mean, you put something in place, so I think if you put something in place and you guys are going through it with Chris and everybody and it's fine, then that's good. But if not, I would not wanna be here, you know, next February finding, you know, reading that we have a finding again. I'd like to know that you guys are checking each other and Chris comes back and says, hey, you know, Mr. Whitty, everything's fine, you guys are good, you probably shouldn't see this next February in the audit report.
I don't think you will. This was part of a larger issue we had.
Been around for a long
seven-
time.
Well, the
se-
fix that was put in place was to have the treasurer overview and sign off on the statements.
Yeah,
The
but.
front treasurer didn't do that 100% of the time, is why you're
Right.
seeing it here.
Right.
So we put a fix in place, but we didn't stick with it across the board.
But we also
That's
had
where I
that-
think this in basket
Right.
solves it, so they sit in the in basket, I've seen it, it's an in basket,
It's a lot of work.
okay?
Okay.
The other part of the situation is that it's kind of counterintuitive to everything that we do in the modern era. Everybody reviews their bank statements online, and yet while Gordon reviews all of these bank statements online, there's no authoritative way to show our auditors yet that that's the way he reviews, so we have to revert back to the paper transaction. And until we can develop a system, which is part of our long-term goal with our new banking partners, to say, how can we have them develop a system of review where if he were to be able to do it online, it would be compliant with Chris and them, that we could show effectively a digital paper trail that he has gone through and sampled all of the accounts monthly online. I think that the interim step now is obviously there has to be a paper trail, and when we started this,
Right.
part of it was, you know, we had cemetery fund with outside mailing address, and we had the tax collector with an independent bank account. We bought those all in-house. That was the beginning of last year. We bought those in, we started making these changes. And then Gordon started implementing the changes at the same time we were transferring to Northwest Community Bank. And he was very intensely worried about the bigger accounts, not understanding that Chris's concern was that we have so many accounts, a lot of the issues are the smaller accounts. So it's not just the big accounts, it's every account. So now we have a system of the in-basket, all of the monthly statements come into the in-basket, and when he comes in to approve his warrants, he goes through all of them and signs off.
Glad you guys are taking care of it.
Has that system been approved by the accounting firm?
That was the recommended system,
Yeah, oh, perfect, yeah.
was,
So then you know that once you put that in place, you're gonna be happy with that.
Yeah, and again,
Okay.
really the only concern was that it wasn't done all the way across the
All the
board.
way across.
The process was fine, just not complete.
So is it likely this will be fixed in 6 months to a year and we will not see his finding next year?
it's fixed now. That's the
Well, that's
system
the
that's in
question.
place. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
The other finding has gotten to be rather common in our audits. This is actually a grant finding as part of our state grant audit. In the DECD grant contracts, there's a clause that says you must file semi-annual financial statements on that project with DECD. And so, then in the audit guide that they give us, it says, make sure that the person has done it, the grantee has done it. Well, in about 3 out of 4 cases, nobody even knows the requirement is in there, so of course they're not filing the semi-annual financial statements. So this year, I called DECD and I said, nobody knows about these. I said, and everybody seems to have a DECD contact that they work with, and they never even asked for them. I says, but in your audit guide, it says they must file them and we must check to make sure they're filing, and they're not. I said, do I really have to report it as a finding? They said, absolutely. So, I don't remember if yours is the one or not. No, I had another one. I said, hi, it's me again. I have someone who did not spend $1 of their grant, but according to the contract, says they have to file semi-annual. Is that a finding? They said, yes. They need to send a statement to us that says they did not spend any of our money. So, that's why I say it's kind of a gotcha. People are working with their DECD reps, and they're not even asking for it, they don't even know it's in there, but the audit department at DECD says it has to be there, so.
Well, if the town signed a contract with the state for a loan or a grant or whatever, then someone agreed that they would follow those rules.
Yep, it's
Even
in,
though Dan's a fairly new first selectman. Earl was in before, and it changes hands over time, so if it was in place before, that person wouldn't know. There's a lot of documentation to read through to find it.
oh yeah.
Well, like anything, you go to the meetings, we had 3 or 4 project managers on the salt shed project. And every time we would go there, we just asked them, is there anything you need, are we compliant, is there anything we can get for you? And they would never notify us or even tell us, because they were unaware. So we walk back and say, look, just please tell us anything that we need to do or send or whatever to do it. This project's done and closed out. I think we're filing the last paper to get the last final reimbursement.
Do you have an accurate handle or list of grants or whatever that need this type of filing now,
For DECD,
in general? If there's a government agency that expects a report from the town, have you identified all of them now?
yes, we have one other.
This response doesn't really say what we're gonna do about it. It says how we kinda missed it, but it doesn't say what we're gonna do for corrective action. I wouldn't know how to follow up to see if we were doing what we said we were going to do.
Well,
The grant's closed, I can ask them if they want us to send them a letter or something. The salt shed's been done for a year.
Well, there's a specific recommendation. I don't see where we're addressing the recommendation.
That's why I asked if Dan could identify the list of grants that they need, this type of filing with, and the answer I heard was, yes, you do. Correct?
I'll call her and see if they want a letter from us.
I mean, that's history, that grant is, but I think the intention is to cover the next grants that are coming up and, assign responsibility for reviewing the terms and conditions to, make sure we know the reporting requirements.
We know them now.
How do you guys do that? Do you abstract the contracts? Is that how you do it going forward? So that if the new selectmen came in, they would know this is something that's.
This was really a learning curve for Christine. She does all the admin on the grants, and this is the first time it's ever come to light. Nobody's ever made any mention of this. It's very, Christine's workload is that of 2 people. And she's generally great, but there's just no way to see this come. So,
So I think that would be something along those lines once the contract's abstracted. Basically.
when you have a DECD grant.
Correct.
The DEP grants are different. So last year's DEP Brook Street Sewer, we didn't have this. Right? So now we're moving on to the Main Street Sewer is DEP. We go to the downtown revitalization, that'll be DECD, I believe. That's the check. That would be the next issue. So. They want semi-annual, they want quarterly, whatever they want. Just tell us, show us the way.
I think that's what your point is though, right, is that there's nothing in there that says what you're doing going forward.
Right. I think it would be a contract review, and somebody specifically is assigned for reporting requirements against it.
that is the end of what I have. There's not a separate letter on top of this. Sometimes there are comments in a letter, sometimes they're in here, sometimes both. There are also small things along the way, we're always giving little ideas and suggestions that aren't, sometimes they may just be what we think might be a more efficient way or a better way. Or they were just a little isolated case where we just say, just take care of that. But these are the only, well, one is basically a finding as dictated by the grantor, and the other is what we consider to be a control deficiency, again, technical terms, control deficiency, over the bank statements, safeguarding of the bank's, bank assets.
How many accounts were involved in that?
How many bank accounts? Oh,
Were involved
30?
in that? 30? You have
Is there 30?
New
Plus-
accounts now?
20?
Plus you're changing banks, 2 banks crossover. So it's
20, or 20.
Oh, yeah. That's what it-
Any other questions for the auditors?
Well, I'm kind of interested in past years, you've given us a little sermon how undesignated reserve is really high and we should be spending it down. And this year I was waiting to hear something along those lines and you haven't said anything. Is it because it's so confusing at this point?
Well, it's partially
Well,
because
yeah.
they keep increasing the recommended fund balances. The rating agencies have been saying 12 to 15. Now GFOA, I read recently, is saying 16 to 18. So where does it end? I don't know. And also, honestly, in some smaller towns who are dealing with, looking at it as percentages, when this storm hit and they had to replace washed out bridges, you guys didn't have much damage here, relatively speaking, but
permanent damage.
if you had to replace a bridge that was washed out, you had to either come up with it out of fund balance or bond it, because you had to front the money, you weren't getting reimbursed till after the fact, and you had to get that bridge or road repaired right away. And so in the smaller towns, they were being attacked for having large fund balances. All of a sudden, everybody said, thank God we could take $500,000 out of fund balance and not have to bond. So it seems with this season of natural disasters, not too many people are concerned the fund balance is high, because they needed it.
2 of the towns to our east, I think it was Avon and Simsbury, both did special appropriations for in excess of $1 million for tree removal. Not permanent road repair or bridge repair, tree removal. Some reimbursable if you fill out the FEMA nightmare of paperwork, because it is very intensive, but $1 million to clear the trees from that.
Reasoning why you had, we had not gotten that one steep grant. But here it just says there are towns that have none, we're talking about.
That's what I meant, that some towns didn't get any grants. Want me to just take out the whole sentence?
Yeah, I don't think it relates to that. I mean, I see what you're saying, but it's kind of like that
Okay.
thought.
There was a little something that I added, when you were talking about getting a generator and so on. I asked whether perhaps we could look into an emergency notification system of some kind. And I believe that you were going to look into that, and I don't see it here anywhere.
I don't have the minutes, unfortunately. What was the discussion that's on record regarding the generator?
I don't know exactly where she's speaking. It's first selectman's report, it's the second paragraph. The generator we have is a 10 kW and it isn't enough to run everything in the town garage. We do have an old one, golf equipment has been contacted. So it was all within that context of how to prepare for another really bad storm. Guide said it would be really nice to look into having something like alert now system that the school has, but something for the townspeople themselves.
I agree with you.
Yeah,
You
and I
did
believe,
have
and I believe you kind of, yeah, so it would be nice to have that in there and perhaps have it followed up on.
So can you give us some wording for the minutes?
A suggestion was made to look into the feasibility of implementing, or the cost of implementing An emergency notification system for townspeople.
Wait a minute, I can only type so fast.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
I'm so sorry. Just throwing words out there.
That's why it's not in there. Just kidding.
Good thing. A suggestion was made to look into implementing
Into the cost of implementing an emergency notification system, townwide, along the lines of the Alert Now system that the schools use. I think that's it.
It sounds familiar.
So a suggestion was made to look into the cost of an emergency notification system townwide, similar to the Alert Now system used by the schools.
So we have an amendment to change the word good to well,
Well,
to get rid of, there are towns that have none, and Maria wants an emergency system.
Any other proposed amendments?
It's
So can I have a motion to approve the amendments?
I'll make that motion.
Second?
Second?
Okay. All in favor of the amendments?
I,
Opposed? Abstain? An abstention? Okay, now we're gonna go ahead and vote on the minutes. All in favor of the minutes as amended?
I,
Opposed? Abstain? One abstention? Okay, minutes are set.
Okay, can I have a copy of that, please?
Oh, sure. Okay, opportunity for public to speak. Any public comment?
I have something, and I'm not public, but I meant to give this to you ahead of time. We had talked about, Reggie had brought up, the Board of Education using, their surplus money. This was an article that was in the Hartford Current that I thought was interesting, that we should all just take a look at, so I'll pass that along. I know we haven't revisited that, but just in case we do, it's what some other boards have done.
It sounds like people are stacking up on each side of the issue.
There's one last thing that wants to.
Yeah, okay, that's all.
Yeah, I read this about Thomas, then they reversed it, yep.
So I wasn't looking for an agenda item or discussion, but to just, in case there is future discussion, we can see what other people have done.
Okay.
And you wanna have a straw vote on it, see where it goes?
I don't, but if you do.
I'm asking, you brought it up.
No, I'm just asking something else.
Okay.
But I think this has been kicking around for a while, I think, this whole topic, we probably should not, keep it floating, we probably should just bury it. I'm not for it, so I don't know where you guys are on it, but I think we ought to just send a message and that's it, and bury it and let it go. I don't think we should do it.
Do you happen to have the motion that I wrote that you mentioned? I didn't write this down.
Do you remember when we talked about it?
We tabled it in
December.
November or December.
It's December.
Okay, and frankly, I would get through the budget season, get a little bit closer to the end of the year, bring it up, and that's when it's relevant.
Well, I think that's when all the personalities and emotions gotta come out. Oh, there's a lot of money there, let's go for it, we want that 1%. Not saying that'll happen, but I think you ought to just do it. It's a neutral time of the year right now. Get it done with and bury it. It's an issue that's gonna continue into the budget season and into the end of the fiscal year, I think. So,
Is this the unexpended education funds account
Yes.
you're referring to? The motion was made that in accordance with the Connecticut General Statute, Section 10-248A, unexpended education funds account, the New Hartford Board of Finance approves the creation of an unexpended education funds account at the end of each fiscal year, and at the request of the New Hartford Board of Education, the Board of Finance may transfer any unexpended funds from the Board of Education's budget to the unexpended funds, education funds account.
can I make a motion?
Well, I just have a question before you make a motion. It wasn't on the agenda, and the last time Reggie brought it up, it was on the agenda. That's why I just wanted to pass them out to look at. I don't know,
Oh, so it doesn't come
But
back again?
let me-
I think you gotta keep reading.
Let me finish. Following a discussion, Member Smith withdrew his motion, and Member Rieger withdrew her second. This item will be placed on the agenda for a future meeting.
I don't think we ought to take action on it until we put it on the agenda.
I would like to make a motion that it be put on the agenda at the next meeting. And we get a decision.
Next regular meeting?
Yep, next regular meeting.
We have a second to your motion?
Second.
Any discussion on it?
That'll be on the unexpended education, wherever.
I hate to see us spend more than about 5 minutes on it at our next meeting, because it's budget time.
I think we'll all have an answer. I have my answer.
All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Okay. Bookkeeper's report.
Okay, I'll start with revenues. Tax collection seems to be no concerns with the tax collector, which is good. I did receive, as of February 1st, I got another 700,000 for ECS. And there is something else that I just wanna bring to your attention and, you know, see how you want me to handle this. Under other income, which is my 480 account, almost to the end there, what we received was a check for $27,646.50. And what the title on the check was for a municipal reserve sharing account. And after further delving into, with Alicia's help, because this comes from Department of Revenue Services, what this was all about, what it amounts to in total over time here will be the manufacturers that we lost last year at budget time. Remember that manufacturers for $110,000? That's what this is about, okay? They're just calling it something different now. Right now, it's this municipal revenue sharing account is what was the title on the check. And this comes from a series of real estate conveyance tax, luxury tax, and what's the other thing?
Sales tax.
Sales tax, yes, thank you. What I did was I put it under other income. I don't know if you guys, maybe you want me to do a journal entry and put it under retail sales tax for the moment, because that's kind of sort of what it is for the year, so you can kind of track it spiked out that way. And then next budget year, we need to rename it a manufacturing transit grant. Because that's really what it is. So right now, it's in other income.
I'll just say something. I'll just explain what the, okay. All right.
She can't help me with this?
No. I did send Ben an email on it, though.
Yeah, I don't remember I remember the email, I don't remember what it said.
Yeah, it's right here.
In my mind, we should call it
It's right
something, we should call it something that it is on the sheet here, that's close to it. And the closest thing that we've got is the,
Is that
Retail
retail
sales
sales
tax.
tax?
where's the manufacturers, is that still on here?
No, because it was, at the time when we did the budget, remember they said there wasn't going to be any. But what they said was there was going to be this retail sales tax.
And what was
And
the
because the
recommendation
check came in as revenue, municipal revenue sharing, I wasn't sure, so I put it in other income.
And what was the recommendation on that email that you happened to pick up?
She suggested that we put it into retail sales tax revenue for right now.
Boy.
And then
great minds
rename
think
the
alike.
line item for next year, with the, what it's going to be called is the, where is it?
It's gonna get renamed.
Manufacturing Transition Grant.
But it's,
Rename it that for next year in the
we're gonna end up
budget.
with a hole in revenue on that line item, okay? When we know we've got revenue, that's at least in part for that. So I wouldn't put it in other, I would put it right there, so we know.
In that
Know where
retail
it is.
sales tax line item,
Yeah.
yeah.
Any disagreement, any other thoughts other than that?
So it's composed of the conveyance, the luxury, and the sales tax?
Yes, those three elements, yes. And we will get 3 payments of that $27,646.50. They're kind of paying it in like quarters is what it's looking like right now.
I think 2 of the quarters are in this fiscal year.
Right.
Next quarter is the next fiscal year, and I believe it's done after that.
And then you have one last payment in August of $20,013.
So why don't you put it into retail sales tax then? Any disagreement with
think?
that? Okay.
I just didn't know, because it was, they had this weird title on the check, municipal revenue sharing account. You know, and there was no explanation whatsoever that came with the thing.
What did we budget? We didn't budget at all for this, or where did we budget?
You budgeted $45,862 in retail sales tax.
And we budgeted nothing for manufacturers, because that
Right.
was eliminated.
Right.
And then this, plus the luxury tax, which I think was kicking in next year, and this other tax was gonna supplement it, that was the idea. Okay? So you got a decision.
Okay.
Anything else?
No, that's all I've got.
Any other comments or questions for the bookkeeper?
Nothing on the expenditure side, maybe?
Well, to be honest with you, we've had a nice mild winter, and that's really what drives your whole budget, okay? So if this keeps up, this is good. And it's my understanding also, and Dan probably, I don't know what he's planning on talking about, but the fourth quarter for the dump, we will not be reaping the benefits of that this year. They're going to be taking it, because they need it.
Good things don't last forever.
So that 62 that's not there is gonna be, they're gonna use all of that?
That's what I just heard from, yep.
Yeah, I met with Jim yesterday. I was trying to just coax him into a little bit of upfront budget information. Is it my turn? Sorry, yeah, keep kicking feet here.
Just quickly on that, though, your capital, you seem like you're pretty short on what you expended to date in the capital. You have a lot of stuff still out there.
The only thing that we really have out there left is Brown's Corner. The,
The lighting?
Oh, and keep in mind again, what you're doing is you're cutting the check from the general fund and you're moving that money over to the capital reserve account. Totally separate from the general fund now.
So it may or may not be, you can't see if it's spent or not, we're looking at
Right.
this report.
that's all I mean,
Okay.
that's right.
Anything else for bookkeeper? Okay, we don't have a treasurer's report tonight, so let's move on to first selectmen's report.
The big report, obviously, this time of year is budget preparation, which we're really in full swing on. Annie just gave you the highlight or the low light. We do like to work Jim Hart at RRDD for any savings or within the budget. He's informed us that just because of all of his expenditures and things associated with the storm and stuff, that there won't be, and he's very certain of that, so it's just not happening. We've met with most departments and gone through letters to every outside agency in terms of budget requests, and met with most. Ben and I have been up to Region 7. I've been up more than once to meet with Judy Palmer. While we don't have anything concrete for Region 7 yet, we know that the challenge for Region 7 really will be a population issue this year. We know that their estimates show that all the other towns are losing population and we are gaining population. So in the world of the pendulum swinging, and sometimes the proration works in your favor, this is a year where the proration for New Hartford just will not work in our favor at all. So, the initial figures are such that the other towns will lose roughly 20 students and we will gain roughly 20 students. So that's really gonna make our budget process challenging, regardless of how thrifty they try to be to put out a conservative budget. It's just gonna be a challenge. So we are scheduled to meet with them again next week. Ben and I will go up and meet with Judy again and work with them the best we can to see that we can impose our will on them to provide us with the most efficient budget in these challenging times. But obviously we have our elected representatives, Noel Gauthier, my brother Rob, Jerem, and we'll see where it goes. Obviously, we'll go through the process and have their presentations.
So what do you mean 20 down, 20 up? So the other towns will collectively be losing about 20, and you're saying that, you know, that is our gain, or is it they're minus 20, but we are what we were last year plus 20?
Correct.
And I
So
think
that-
it was a 1 point something% change in
Assessment.
ADM.
Yeah.
Just because even if the budget was flat,
Right.
it was between 1 and 2%. I thought it was closer to 1, I guess, right?
But that's gotta be the end of the wave of the increase going into regional then, right? Because I think, I mean, we've been on a downhill at the elementary school level for a while. This year, they're down another 11 or 12 students again, so.
Did I gather that it was gonna be up for a couple of years?
That's what I
So
took.
is this the end of it, or is this the beginning of it?
Well, I think we're gonna get some more, when Ben and I meet with them, obviously we'll be looking for some more information on population. I know that they sensed our concern. I mean, first and foremost, we're concerned about the product that the kids get. We wanna make sure the education is good. But in the same regard, we all know that there's certain practical reality is that people can only pay so much. You know, there's only so much ability to pay. So we talked with them. They are also struggling with new graduation requirements that are coming into effect in about 4 years, 4 to 5 years, that they are starting to have to add more sections and prepare for the future as they prepare to implement curriculum that will allow kids to take and have, I believe, 1 or 1.5 more credits a year, and they have to provide more sections in specific areas, which will require them to modify their staff. I think the year 1 changes will not cost any money.
So do
But
they need
over
us to
time.
give them some guidance before they start plugging numbers in?
Well, I think we're going up to give them guidance.
Oh,
Well, I mean the Board of Finance.
We gave them an indication that we just can't support the kind of numbers that they were talking about, although they didn't give us formal numbers. They hadn't presented anything to their board yet, so they were a little soft.
What do you think the estimates were for
But
us?
it sounded like perhaps 3 to 4%, or even, I would say 4% increase before you start looking at the ADM. But I don't think you can run to the bank with any of that, because there was revenues that needed to be looked at. There were a lot of things that weren't on the table yet. They were kind of putting their concerns on the table, and we, New Hartford, as well as someone else, I think it was Norfolk in particular, that sent the message that, the recession's not over.
Yeah,
We can't,
that's the trouble.
and as far as these mandated changes in curriculum, sometimes the way you fight back is by holding the purse strings back.
It is a
Forced to
struggle.
change to say, sorry, we can't accept that, or change the structure to do it within the hours that we're paying teachers to do it, so that you don't have to add more costs because you're adding more curriculum. Find a way to do it, because this is the amount of money that we have to spend.
I think they ought to all have their number from us before they start plugging their numbers in, because if you look at the local elementary school, I'm not sure how they come up with a 7.8% increase in regular ed when there's a 0% increase in the contract for regular ed this year. It's absolutely baffling to me where they come up with these numbers. They should be at 0% to maybe minus 2% this year from last year. And regional, I don't think should get anything this year. I think it should be 0%. enough is enough. They gotta tighten their belts and they gotta become a little bit more efficient.
Like I said, we're going up to meet with them, and the budget process is just starting. I think that we've,
They're gonna start plugging the numbers in and they're gonna come back and then it's gonna be, well, we already did this, you should have said something before. I think collectively, we also have to get that message out there before they start producing, piles and piles of paper that cost us money, needlessly.
Just don't know how you can send more kids there and still expect to have 0% though. That sounds really unrealistic.
No, it doesn't.
I mean, you can say that, but, those kids cost money.
Sure it does.
But you're not saying 0% to New Hartford, you're saying 0% to Regional 7. And then
Well,
from
we're
that
gonna
0%.
And we're gonna get hit
Right,
with that,
but
yes.
what you're saying is their budget should be 0, not the New Hartford assessment is 0.
They should take it, they should take the lump this year.
That's generally the way we've looked at it is, the ADM, the students coming from what towns is the luck of the draw. You can't really go to battle on those kind of things unless it's a consistent trend over time. You really have to look at the budget that's being spent, and sometimes you win, sometimes you lose on the.
It's a bad
percentage of
situation
it.
for people in town that are not receiving anything, or an increases, or a negative. It's not changed.
Well, I think they got that message not only from New Hartford, okay, that this is not your get well year. This is a recessionary year, very similar to the last few years. The only thing that's improving really of note is the stock market. Everything else is, it's still not a whole lot different than it's been for the last couple of years.
I saw the preliminary numbers for local, is what, 3.some odd percent, 3.7, I think, something like that.
I haven't seen any numbers for local.
Hopefully they're working on it, and they're gonna come back with something, but, and that's with a down, I would say load of students as well, that's down. Plus, they've pushed off closing one of the schools for another year. So they still have all of those, services in duplicate and triplicate again. And they could probably end up with 1.5 schools instead of 3 schools.
Well, we're gonna hear a little bit more of Region 7, hopefully they will bring something back, so we have at least a rough starting point in terms of what they're trying to do, but, we've given them a message. And, the point that I made was the pushback can come from, people just unwilling to pay for it. Okay, you have these mandates, but here's what you have. The question came back, well, how do you, what's the strategy to make that happen? And as well, the strategy is to just not approve budgets, to hold it to 0 and say, go figure it out. You're gonna get 0 to work with. We can't control that. We can control the amount of money that you get. But you and us and everyone else has to go back to the state legislature, or wherever we have to go, to either change the restrictions or look internally to say, okay, so do you have, 7 classes a day instead of 6 classes a day that you're teaching? So it happens within the same cost structure. But you have to, the point was you have to force a change, because you can't just keep doing what the federal government does and the state government seems to be doing, just add more cost regardless of what the revenue is.
But a comment that I have, and we went through this last year, is I think that the town, the people in the town of New Hartford, taxpayers, or I should say taxpayers that are not tied into the education system because they don't have a child in school or they're not part of the education system, they don't have access to communication. And last year, the superintendent utilized the Alert Now system, which I think was an unfair practice to send out the messages exclusively to parents and people that have children in school to get them to support the budget. In the meantime, all of the seniors in town, all of the people that don't participate in that, were never communicated. So there was an imbalance of who came, and I think that there was an effort on our part to try and get that message out as well. And I would encourage our first selectman to take control over this Alert Now system so that it's shared properly, probably between both the Board of Ed and the town, and we get everybody in town registered or some system that when a notice goes out relative to a vote or support for the budget, that everybody in town has an opportunity to be aware of it, and not just the ones for that exclusive, group. I think that's important for us, because we're gonna face that again this year, and I hope that they don't do that, because I will be very upset if they pull that trigger and they try and do that again. That's a warning I think our chairman should set across the bow, not to do it. If they do it, our first selectman should have access to that alert now system, so every phone number in New Hartford gets that message about the budget.
Had we put Maria's suggestion in the minutes last time, it should already be in place.
You're right.
Well, we'll have a chance to talk to the Board of Education and the superintendent next month.
Yeah, because if we don't have access to every person in town connected to Alert Now, then it shouldn't be used for things other than we're late or school's closing because of a storm or there's parent-teachers night, that kind of stuff. It should not have anything to do with, please come out and support our budget. Because my neighbor across the street, my neighbor next door is not gonna get that message. And then I'm gonna get phone calls because, you know,
Was the message to support the budget, or was it just to get out to vote, or?
making them aware of the budget. I can't do that, that's a no-no.
Didn't mean to start such a spirited
Somebody
discussion.
got us
You guys
off track.
wanna keep going, let's
Too
go.
late now, baby.
Your presentation time is up.
Yeah. The only other thing I was gonna tell you is we had USDA in last week. I never spent more time doing Excel spreadsheets for the WPCA than I know you started, Andy started, you reviewed, we finally actually had them. It was just crazy. But that's just the way it works, and we just don't have, we don't have the training on how they want these spreadsheets presented. Their spreadsheets were contaminated, it was almost ridiculous. I had to redo them all, redo the expenditures that you guys had done in were good, but the revenue sides and how it was funded and linking the pages over and the contract revisions and the notes and everything, and we finally have that in for final submission, so. As I said to Annie, I've got it down over 8.9 million over 22 months, 6 months of which, and 3 million was before I was even elected. I got it down to $688 to true, and I could probably spend $6,000 worth of labor to find the $688, but we're gonna go through it and see if we can't do it. I've submitted them to USDA for their review. I mean, with everything, with the refinancing, the debt, the interest income, everything, all the way down. And I think that the 600 is statistically insignificant. I couldn't tell if it was before I was here or not, but it's close. When we still have 452,000, was it 55,000 in the bank because the project came in under budget thanks to our building oversight committee. We've made some pitches to the USDA to use those for other projects that are of similar like nature. And we're hoping that we'll get some positive things there. Obviously, the first effort was to link it with our steep grant, but it's nice to have that burden off our back. I mean, it was just a tremendous chore, and I'm glad that it's done. But it was an Excedrin headache, baby. That was just terrible. It took me 4 full days to get the thing right with all the expenditures just on it, and then a couple half days. You know, it's a week worth of Excel. We just sat in there all day. Annie, get us this. Annie, get us that. You know, but it's nice to have it done. So we look forward to the budget process. We know that it'll be, I think, our most difficult challenge. The selectmen discussed the budget a little bit in concept the other night. You know, the general government budget has been running zeros for a while now, and I think that, you know, the general assumption is how long can you go like that before you start eroding services and start really letting some deferred maintenance and infrastructure go. You know, so I think that we have
So
a challenge.
But the paper had a report in there, I guess, was about 1.2, 1.6, I guess you were projecting right now for an increase for the town budget.
I think that what the selectmen, said theoretically is that they'd like to keep any proposals that we would consider in all realms of consideration under 2%, you know, in the 1 to 2% range, when we just know that.
Right, and then the capital was about 300 and some odd thousand, I think, right? And that was what they were reporting.
That's our, initial endorsed proposal that's gone out for the capital subcommittee for review.
And Kate, did you get anything from the Board of Ed yet on the capital?
I did, but theirs again is rough, and I sent that out to all the members of our committee, and we'll be meeting again. I did email Ben because I didn't know what the procedure is. How do I communicate with you? When do I communicate with you? Am I on the agenda? So as soon as we iron that out, I'll share whatever you
Do we
want
have an
with you.
estimate of what it was, by any chance, or?
I don't, I didn't see it. My suggestion, if it's available, is to, I was gonna ask this for other items to talk about. Should we, at our next meeting, at our March meeting, pick up some part of the budget and have a presentation? Probably the easiest thing to do would be the capital, if it's ready.
Well, I have copies that my committee didn't, only two of us showed tonight. So I do have some copies of what I was handing out to them, if you want to take a peek at that. It has the capital so far from the boards. I don't know if I have enough for everybody.
Even if it's rough.
Would you think you'd be ready for
We're meeting
for
again on
their-
the 6 o'clock before our meeting on the 20th. Do we have one on the 28th?
That's the selectmen meeting.
The selectmen, we're meeting again on the 28th.
So
You want to pass that
the
to Ben?
March meeting is probably the 10th or something like that. I mean, it's gonna either be at the March meeting or it's gonna be part of the budgets, you know.
Whenever you want, I mean.
I would say the March Board of Finance meeting.
The
Okay.
13th.
March 13th. Okay. But again, this is rough when you're looking at that now.
How has this changed from the 5-year plans? Are there new things?
It's different, yeah.
Because the intent of,
They have a
obviously,
5-year plan with theirs, but it's probably not the same 5-year plan we looked at last year.
right, what I'm getting at in the long run, I'd like to see a 5-year plan that is somewhat stuck to it.
Well, I mean, we were talking about the issues that,
Otherwise, why have a 5-year plan?
right, that are on the Board of Selectmen side that are recurring. Yeah, this is their.
Okay, I'll take a look through it.
Okay. And call me with any comments that you have.
So
This-
for
this
the,
Did you get one, Lorraine?
As of now, it's just a rough,
If you don't have a copy.
these are not final, correct?
Pardon?
For the record, these are not final, this is just a
No,
rough.
no, this was
idea.
the first rough, this is Gordon Ross's copy, but you can have it, he didn't come to me.
so for, if we could, for the next Board of Finance meeting on the 13th, have the,
You want
I'm
to speak
okay, I'll
upstairs?
just speak.
have the
Okay.
presentation that's
I'll see
been
that.
approved by the owners of that budget. So the Board of Education should say, here's what I want in my budget, and the first selectman or the Board of Selectmen should say, here's what I want. As opposed to each department that has put their wish list in, and the Board of Selectmen hasn't agreed to it yet. So we can at least look at that, and then the rest of the budgets, I guess we're here on it's either that next Saturday or the following Saturday.
And the capital expenditure plan, the capital expenditure committee was approved also.
Sorry?
I'd like to see, not only the boards, but the committee approved
Yeah.
this as a recommendation.
And we haven't really met as full
Oh,
committee.
I know.
The selectmen took a vote to endorse our submittal for review by the capital subcommittee, but there's support generally behind that budget. I think the motion was just to try to craft a motion that's consistent with the procedure, but knowing that we're still early in the budget process, if something were to arise that we had to make some modifications, we reserve the right to do that.
Okay, anything else, Dan, from your
No,
report?
all set.
Other items coming before the board? Dan mentioned the Region 7 budget pre-meeting. Grand list, I sent an email around that showed, from Beth, that showed that the grand list, it looks like it's 1.29, that's before appeals, She's concerned that based on last year's appeals, there were some pretty healthy appeals and significant changes. I don't think it changes the overall number that much. Right now, she's saying 1.29%. I emailed the spreadsheet to you. I've got a copy here for the minutes. If anybody else didn't get a chance to see yet or would like one, I've got extra copies for the board that may want that, but she's identified more of a grand list increase than I thought they would be, no doubt.
And the 1.29 at current mill is equates to how much new revenue? 200? I'm gonna get a calculator.
I see that.
I can't tell you. I'm drawing a blank on it. I certainly know for the next meeting, though. I just,
We should have an estimate when I break it down.
anything else to come before the board?
Just one question about the capital. What's the status of the septic systems at Brody? Is that part of the capital? Would that be a capital item?
We are, it was not, there's been a change in thought on that. We continue to study and track water usage in the summer during camp. We are going to continue to monitor the water usage, but considering the quantity of projected costs, the rec commission has come to me with a modified version of their capital plan to say that while in past years renovating and possibly expanding the Brody House has not been a consideration, they've now kind of said, well, hold on a second, maybe we should reconsider that position because we know that the building is, you know, got a functioning septic system and perhaps we can work within that realm and make use of that, you know, under the fact that it's existing and perhaps could serve as a modified building. And considering the kind of costs associated with what the, you know, our consultants are telling us, and the fact that we also have that big field house down there that offers different type of utility, you know, all those little cabins, very small, don't necessarily have the utility of a bigger building. If we're gonna put one bigger septic system, would we choose to put it in for multiple cabins? Would we choose to put in a new one for a bigger building and perhaps rehab the Brody House building? So I think their thought process has some merit and worthy of some study in terms of doing some design work and to see if we could use that building in a different way and possibly kind of get around this septic issue in a less expensive way to the taxpayers. So, something that I have to tell you, I mean, the email trail was kind of, you know, a little hilarious because when I see the capital request come in, it kind of floored me and I wasn't ready for it. I said, well, hold on, I need some explanation on this one because I thought, you know, we're talking about removing the structure, you know, a few years down the road, and then after you get the explanation, it actually seemed to be something that I think maybe we should pause and take a look at. So, we know that the building is leased through April of next year, so it's not a short-term issue, but put some design work and consultant money into that, which is factored into our capital request, that perhaps there's something that can be done there, and there are some good examples out there, like the Barkhampton Senior Citizens building down there on the River Road, which took an older building and put a nice little addition on it. It can be done tastefully and it might just work. But I think we need some expert advice to show us if in fact we can do it.
Will you be doing the same kind of a study of the field house to see exactly what use that could be put to before you start spending another $20,000 on it then? Or do you already have a use for it that you just haven't shared?
Well, I think it's pretty wide open. I mean, it's possibly the largest gymnasium in town, so the opportunities for recreational sports are pretty much wide open.
Because you said 20 people max, right, at this point, can use it?
At current, without changes for fire and safety in terms of breakaway doors, lighted entrances, exterior lighting, They said that basically we could use it right now for small gatherings with potable water, i.e. bottled water and a porta-john. We could use it right now. If we wanted to use it for larger and step up to the next category, then the fire marshal and the building department would like to see the safety doors for fire. They'd like to see the illuminated signs above the doors. They'd like to see smoke and fire detectors. But the other issue there is that we think we have possibly some asbestos on that stage, so I've signed an agreement to have a consultant go in and do some testing. We don't want kids in a building with loose asbestos tiles, or at least not partitioned.
Yeah, I just like what you're doing for the Brody House. I think it makes perfect sense to go in there and do a study and then really see what your needs are. I'd love to see the same thing for the field house.
Well, I think they're completely different though, because with when you're talking about converting a house over, and you have ADA and you have small doorways and small rooms, that provides one challenge. When you have a 6,400 square foot clear span building, you know, I think it lends itself to possibly any use.
At this point, it sounds like it's shoring up the infrastructure more than anything else.
Well, I mean, the roof job couldn't have come off better. I mean, it's just dry as a bone in there now, and totally sealed and preserved, and I think it was money well spent. But as we move it along, I think that there's, obviously we want to make sure we go about it before we bring people into the building, that the asbestos issue would concern me to bring, even with small groups, to bring children there, unless that area wasn't at least partitioned off or the hazardous material removed.
Is that the 20,000 that you have in there? Is that the 20,000 that you have?
Yeah, well, that's what we have to start off with. The stage removal and the asbestos would be that. But we have right now, that has yet to be determined. I've signed a $680 task order to have Fuss and O'Neill go out and do whatever steps necessary to quantify exactly what we're dealing with.
Just would be nice to know what the overall goal is and how much it's gonna cost to get there. Because, 50 and then 20 and then would be, that's what I would like to see for any of anything that money goes into with the building house and any other building. Thank you.
Anything else to come before the board? There's a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second, third?
Okay, all in favor?